Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Today, we're going to cover something that can feel intimidating when you're new to cybersecurity, the terminology. If you've ever listened to cybersecurity professionals talk, it almost sounds like they're speaking another language. You hear words like threat, vulnerability, risk, incident, authentication, and it's easy to think, I'll never remember all of this. I want you to relax. You are not expected to memorize everything today. The purpose of this lesson is simply to make those words sound familiar, feel familiar, because you're going to hear them over and over again throughout the program. So let's start with the most important one, the word asset. An asset is simply something valuable that an organization wants to protect. This could be customer information. It could be employee records. It could be a laptop, a website, a computer system. It could even be the company's reputation. If it's valuable to that business, it's an asset. So that's the first one. Remember, assets. The second thing is threat. A threat is anything that could potentially cause harm. For example, a cyber criminal is a threat. A phishing email is a threat. A hurricane that can damage a data center is a threat. Even an employee accidentally sending confidential information to the wrong person is a threat. A threat doesn't always mean something bad has happened. It simply means that something has the potential to cause harm. That's the second one, a threat. The next word I want you to remember is vulnerability. A vulnerability is a weakness. Think of it like leaving your front door unlocked. That doesn't mean someone will break in. It just means there's an opportunity for something bad to happen. In cybersecurity, vulnerabilities could include weak passwords. They could include old software. They could include missing security updates or even poor security processes. So those are vulnerabilities. The next word is risk. Now let's put those together. A risk exists when a threat can take advantage of a vulnerability. For example, if your front door is unlocked, that's a vulnerability. A burglar is the threat, right? The possibility that the burglar enters your home, that's the risk. Does that make sense? Cybersecurity is really about reducing risk. If you don't get that, don't worry. We're going to go through it again in class. The next word is an incident. An incident is when something actually happens. So maybe someone clicked a phishing email. Maybe a laptop was stolen and it had sensitive data on it. Maybe malware was discovered on a computer. Not every incident becomes a disaster, but every incident needs to be investigated. Next thing is what's called a data breach. A data breach happens when sensitive information is accessed or exposed without permission. So examples of this could include customer information, credit card numbers, medical records, passwords, personal information. There are so many stories that you hear on the news about that information being leaked. That's a data breach. Now let's talk about authentication. Authentication simply means prove who you are. When you enter your password, that's authentication. When you use Face ID, that's authentication. When you get that code and you enter it, that's authentication. So that's another form of authentication. So that was another word there. Now let's talk about authorization. People often confuse authentication with authorization. Authentication asks, who are you? So you prove who you are. Authorization asks, what are you allowed to do? What are you allowed to see? So think about a hospital. A nurse and a doctor both authenticate by logging into the system, but they may not have the same access to the same information. That's authorization, where there is different access for different people. And then I want to tell you about multi-factor authentication, MFA. You're going to hear this term constantly. MFA simply means using more than one way to verify your identity. For example, something you know, so that could be your password, plus something you have, so that could be a code sent to your phone, right? So that's multi-factor authentication. It could also be something you know and something you are, like your fingerprint, is one of the simplest ways to improve security. We'll talk about that in class. Another word I want you to know of is malware. Malware is short for malicious software. It's software designed to harm computers or steal information. For example, it could be a virus, it could be ransomware or spyware. You don't need to know the differences yet, we'll get there. Just remember that malware is something harmful. It's a harmful software. Another word I want you to remember is phishing. You've probably heard of this one. Phishing is when someone tries to trick you into giving away information. So that is usually done through emails or text messages that you receive that try to trick you, or a fake website being created, or a phone call. Those are people that try to trick you into giving up information. That's one of the most common cyber threats out there. Now, here's the good news. You do not need to become a cyber expert in those terms today. In fact, by the time you complete this program, you'll be using these words naturally because you're going to hear them repeatedly during our discussions, during our assignments, and during our projects. Learning cybersecurity is a bit like learning a new language. At first, everything sounds unfamiliar, but after hearing the same words over and over and over again every week, they're going to become part of your vocabulary. That's exactly why we're here. So do not panic. Don't feel pressure to memorize everything. Focus on understanding the idea behind the word. Because if you understand the idea and what it does, then it means you really understand it. So here is your action for this lesson. I want you to choose 5 of today's terms and explain them in your own words, as if you are explaining them to a friend or a family member, somebody who's never heard of cybersecurity. Don't Google the definitions. Just use your own words. If you can explain something simply, it usually means you really understand it. We'll continue building your cybersecurity vocabulary one step at a time. Remember, confidence comes from repetition, not memorization.